It's a classic Canadian scene that lines over 20 million acres of farmland. Canola fields soon ready for harvest.
Had a phone call with senior Chinese leadership since 2017, but in the end, that hasn't helped the tariff situation, leaving Canada in a trade government.
Both moves done to align Canadian policy with the Americans. Little solace for the 40,000 farmers who grow canola annually, including Ryan Hoffer on his family farm in Bozeman, Manitoba. Could continue to drop.
There's more supply, price goes down, so I think
Canada's farmers are staring down one of their toughest seasons in years. China has announced a 75.8% tariff on Canadian canola, a move that slams shut what used to be one of Canada's most important export markets. Prices are already sliding, and over 40,000 growers across the prairies are bracing for heavy losses. This is not just a story about crops. It is the fallout from a much larger conflict, a trade war where Donald Trump's tariff-first strategy has left Canada stuck in the middle. Trump's tariff strategy and its ripple effect back in office, Donald Trump has returned to his trademark weapon, tariffs. To him, these import taxes are more than just protection for American factories. They are a show of strength, a way to pressure China and remind allies who sets the rules. When Washington slapped high duties on Chinese steel and electric vehicles, Canada quickly followed. Prime Minister Mark Carney raised Canada's own tariffs to stay aligned with the U.S., hoping not to be isolated in North America's supply chains. But following Trump came at a price. Beijing didn't strike directly at the U.S. Instead, it punished Canada, the easier target. Why China chose canola? China's response was surgical. By hitting canola worth more than 43 billion Canadian dollars a year, Beijing attacked one of Canada's most valuable farm exports. Last year, it had already blocked Canadian canola oil with a 100% duty. Now, with the new 75.8% tariff on raw seed, China has essentially closed its doors to Canadian canola altogether. For prairie farmers, the impact is immediate. Local bids for canola have dropped nearly $1 a bushel, translating into thousands of dollars in losses for individual families. Add in a bumper harvest this year, and oversupply is likely to push prices even lower. China has also launched an investigation into Canadian peas, hinting that more products may be next. The message is clear: follow Trump, and Canadian agriculture will take the hit. Canada in a tight corner. This leaves Canada squeezed on both sides. On one hand, Trump has revived tariffs that also hit Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber. On the other, China is retaliating with measures that strike directly at Canadian farmers. It is a lose-lose position. Canada cannot afford to break away from the U.S. and its largest trading partner and security ally. But it also cannot ignore China, once its second-largest customer for crops. Farmers now find themselves collateral damage in a power struggle far beyond their control. Trump at the center. At the heart of this storm is Donald Trump. For him, the suffering of Canadian farmers is secondary. What matters is forcing China into concessions and proving that America holds the upper hand. This approach is not new. During his first presidency, Trump slapped duties on Canadian steel and aluminum, despite decades of integrated trade. In his second term, tariffs are no longer temporary bargaining tools. They are permanent fixtures of his economic playbook. For Ottawa, Trump's strategy means following Washington offers no shield. Canada may stand beside America, but when China retaliates, it stands alone. Carney's limited options. Prime Minister Carney has tried diplomacy. In June, he spoke with China's premier, the first call between Canadian and Chinese leaders since 2017. Yet the tariffs came anyway. At home, frustration is rising. Saskatchewan's premier has demanded stronger federal action. Farmers want relief, subsidies, new markets, or trade defenses. But Carney's hands are tied. Defying Trump risks angering Washington. Confronting Beijing risks escalation. It is a balancing act with no easy way out. The human cost. Beyond headlines and policy debates, the real impact is felt in rural communities. Lower canola prices ripple through the economy. Processors, truckers, and exporters all earn less. Families tighten budgets, rural businesses lose customers, and young farmers question whether there's a future in agriculture. Canada's broader economy, already slowed by weak growth and household debt, faces another shock. Politically, the perception that Ottawa cannot shield its farmers risks fueling resentment and distrust. This is where the trade war becomes personal. families are left wondering not just about global politics, but about paying bills, covering loans, and keeping farms alive for the next generation. What comes next? In the short run, Canada will scramble to redirect canola shipments to Europe, India, or Japan. But none of those markets can fully replace China. Meanwhile, Trump shows no signs of backing down. New tariffs on sensitive industries like semiconductors and pharmaceuticals are already being discussed in Washington. Each new round will pressure Canada to keep pace, deepening its exposure to retaliation. Longer term, Canada faces a difficult question. Can it build a trade strategy that reduces its reliance on both the US and China? Or will it remain trapped in a cycle of reacting to great power conflicts it cannot control? Conclusion: Trump versus Carney. The contrast is stark. Trump wields tariffs like weapons, unconcerned about the fallout for allies. Carney seeks dialogue, but diplomacy alone cannot shield farmers from global power struggles. For Canada, the lesson is clear. When giants clash, smaller allies pay the price. And for tens of thousands of Canadian farmers, that price is being paid right now, in falling incomes, shrinking markets, and uncertain futures.
President Trump announcing tariffs on imports from Canada of 35%. Something must have made him mad. I don't know what the latest is. Maybe Megan knows.
35% on imports from Canada, which, by the way, the second largest U.S. trading partner and the largest buyer of American goods last year. Now, an administration official did tell me late last night that the exemptions currently in place for USMCA compliant goods likely will remain the universal baseline tariff from the 10% level where it has been since April to 15 or even 20%. So that would mean everything U.S. companies and consumers buy from abroad would cost at a minimum an extra 20% in the form of tariffs. And if I can take just a step back, this week began with the president postponing that major...
President Donald Trump has announced a 35% tariff on imports from Canada, effective August 1st. Canada is not a minor partner. It is America's second largest trading partner and the biggest buyer of U.S. goods. This move is more than a trade measure. It is a shock to North America's economic relationship. The key question: is Trump making a bold negotiating move, or has he just opened the door to higher costs for Americans and new risks for the global economy? Starting August 1st, tariffs on Canadian imports will rise from 25% to 35%. Exemptions remain for USMCA-compliant goods and for energy imports, which stay at a lower 10%. The timing surprised many. Only days earlier, Trump had postponed a July 9th tariff deadline, leading markets to believe his stance was softening. Instead, the new Canada tariff signals escalation, alongside fresh threats toward Brazil and key global industries. Why would Trump target Canada now? Some point to lingering disputes. Earlier, Canada introduced a digital services tax. Prime Minister Mark Carney withdrew it under U.S. pressure, but Trump may still be signaling dissatisfaction. Others see this as negotiating pressure. By hitting America's closest ally, Trump shows the world that no partner is untouchable. And there is also domestic politics. Presenting himself as the defender of U.S. workers helps Trump with voters ahead of the 2026 midterms. These motives point to one consistent theme. Trump uses tariffs not just as economic tools, but as political leverage. The costs start at home. For consumers, cars, lumber, aluminum, and packaged foods will all get more expensive. A jump from 25 to 35% tariffs cannot be absorbed quietly. It shows up on price tags. For businesses, automakers in Detroit, construction firms, and retailers who rely on Canadian imports will face higher costs and tougher competition. For energy, even with lower tariffs, Canada could respond with its own measures in other sectors. The broader effect is uncertainty. When tariffs change overnight, businesses hesitate to invest or hire. The real weight of this policy falls first on American families and companies. Canada depends heavily on access to the U.S. market. Carney must now decide whether to retaliate or diversify. Retaliation could target U.S. agriculture, dairy, or steel, areas that carry political impact in swing states. Diversification means building closer trade ties with Europe and Asia, something Carney has already started in both trade and defense policy. This is more than a trade skirmish. If pushed, Canada could reduce its reliance on the U.S., permanently altering the economic balance of North America. The Canada tariff also fits into a wider strategy. Trump has floated raising the minimum tariff on all imports from 10% to 15-20%. He has mentioned a 50% tariff on copper and even a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals. Together, these moves outline a shift toward a high-tariff America. For trading partners, it signals unpredictability. For businesses, it means redesigning global supply chains. The risk is clear. Instead of targeted disputes, the world may slide into a broad trade conflict. Trump's 35% tariff on Canada is not just about tariffs. It represents a broader gamble, using economic weapons to secure political goals. The immediate results will be higher prices, strained supply chains, and rising tensions with allies. The long-term outcome could be either greater U.S. leverage or lasting damage to America's credibility as a trading partner. So the question remains, is this bold strategy a masterstroke that protects U.S. industries, or a misstep that risks inflation and isolation? One thing is certain. This 35% tariff marks a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations and a warning shot to the world. The impact won't stop at the border. It will show up in store prices, business decisions, and global alliances. What do you think? Is Trump defending America's workers or pushing the economy toward unnecessary turbulence?